how to introduce David Crystal. Professor David Crystal, FBA, OBE, or it probably should be the other way round. Whichever, David Crystal is undoubtedly one of the foremost linguisticians in the world today and the preeminent expert on the history, development and usage of the English language. His OBE, perhaps uniquely, was for services to the English language. He has made numerous radio and television programs, including the BBC's Story of English series. He has been president or patron of numerous language-related organisations, including the International Association for the Teaching of English as a Foreign Language. Following his early years as a research student at UCL, working with Randolph Quirk on the Survey of English Usage project, he has taught at several and lectured at scores of universities around the world. When the Globe Theatre bravely decided to put on a performance of Romeo and Juliet in authentic Elizabethan pronunciation in 2004, it was David Crystal, naturally, who they turned to as their language consultant. Underpinning these activities, David has published around 100 books on phonetics and phonology, on language teaching, language death and lexicography, on grammar and stylistics, on the language of the internet, and on English as a global language. From a proprietorial Cambridge standpoint and celebrating yet another anniversary, it is exactly 40 years since his book Prosodic Systems and Intonation in English inaugurated the Press's flagship academic series, Cambridge Studies in Linguistics. And it was in that same year, 1969, that David became editor of the Press's flagship serial, the Journal of Linguistics. But perhaps most significantly of all, and most appropriately for someone with so encyclopedic a range of interests, David is the author of two of the most respected and widely used reference books on the subject of language, the Cambridge Encyclopedia of Language and the Cambridge Encyclopedia of the English Language. Combined sales to date, 475,000 copies. And if that weren't enough, in 1990 he edited the Cambridge Encyclopedia, whose entries range from the A-bomb to the zygote. All that, and he also speaks Welsh. Ladies and gentlemen, David Crystal.
Well, noswaith dda, indeed. On anniversaries. As a general encyclopedia editor, I was for many years professionally interested in anniversaries and the events that give rise to them. Anniversaries, as it were, helped pay the mortgage. In that same capacity, I also learned to be deeply suspicious of them. I once edited a book called On This Day, the sort of listing that you find in many a newspaper or magazine recording events which happened on a particular day. Andy Brown referred to 2 or 3 earlier on. My editorial team collected information relating to some 15,000 supposed anniversaries. As we began the process of checking, we found that about a half of these had to be jettisoned, either because of conflicting and unverifiable claims or because the data was unverifiable in principle. Anniversaries aren't as easy to celebrate as you might think. Take the apparently simple aim to celebrate the year in which, if you're interested in beginnings, Shah Jahan began to build the Taj Mahal. Or, if endings, the year in which the building was completed. For the first, if you consult various reference books, you have the choice of 1630, 1631, and 1632. If you date from the death of Shah Jahan's wife, you will go for 1631. If you date from receipt of planning permission, as it were, you will go for 1632, or around 1632, as Encyclopaedia Britannica puts it, being precise even in its imprecision. As for completion, the mausoleum was finished by about 1643, the mosque, wall and gateway by about 1649, and the rest of the complex, including the stables, the guardhouse and the other structures, some 5 years later. Shah Jahan would have given his builders their final stage payment, as it were, in 1654, but the main project was finished some 10 years earlier. So is 2009, the 360th anniversary of the building of the Taj Mahal, or not? You might think people are in a better situation. At least they must be born or die on a particular day. Well, not necessarily. Depending upon which book you read, Louis Armstrong was born either on the 4th of July, 1900, as he repeatedly claimed himself throughout his life, or the 4th of August, 1901, as a researcher suggested in the 1980s, having unearthed a baptism certificate. Now, a baptismal record is no proof of birth, of course. We know that from the famous case of Shakespeare. Born when, exactly? The Register of Holy Trinity Church in Stratford records the baptism of William, the first son of John Shakespeare, Gulielmus Filius Johannes Shakespeare, on the 26th of April, 1564. Now, the custom of celebrating the birthday on the 23rd really began in the 18th century, fostered probably by a natural desire on the part of most people to see England's greatest dramatic poet celebrated with and associated with the feast day of St. George, England's patron saint. So when was the birth? The practice of Elizabethan England, as specified in the 1559 Book of Common Prayer, was this: the pastors and curates shall oft admonish the people that they defer not the baptism of infants any longer than the Sunday or other holy day next after the child be born, unless upon a great and reasonable cause declared to the curate and by him approved. In 1564, the 23rd was a Sunday, and the main holy day in April, St. Mark's Day, followed soon after on the 25th. So if the parents were following the usual practice, a child born on the 23rd would be baptized at the latest by the 25th. So why the 26th? Well, maybe there was a great and reasonable cause to delay things. Maybe the Shakespeares were influenced by the widespread superstition that St. Mark's Day was unlucky. There is no evidence to suggest any of these things for definite, and without such evidence, the tradition stands. End of story? No. Beginning of story. For the 23rd of April in 1564 was not the same as the 23rd of April today. By the mid-16th century, the Julian calendar had fallen 10 days behind the solar year. So in 1582, Pope Gregory XIII introduced the Gregorian calendar, which we follow today. Most European countries immediately made the change. Catholic countries such as Italy and Spain had Thursday, the 4th of October, 1582, immediately followed by Friday, the 15th of October. But the then anti-papal England rejected the idea and didn't catch up until 1752, when September the 2nd was immediately followed by September the 14th. This means that in 1564 in England, the date referred to then as the 23rd of April corresponds to what we would today call the 3rd of May. There should be 2 birthday weekends in Stratford-upon-Avon each year, it seems to me. Now, the switch from old style to new style dates is the bane of the wannabe anniversarian. You have to know what is going on, country by country. In Russia, for example, the Gregorian calendar was not introduced until the 14th of February 1918, new style. We all know there was an October Revolution in 1917. Actually, it wasn't. In Gregorian terms, it began on the 7th of November, new style, 25th of October, old style. Accounts can get quite confusing if you aren't aware of the date change. One reference book tells you that William III arrived in England on the 5th of November. Another tells you that he left the Netherlands on the 11th of November. The first is new style, the second is old style. And you have to allow for the situation where two people die on the same date, but not on the same day. Shakespeare and Cervantes are both credited with the 23rd of April 1616, but Cervantes died Gregorian while Shakespeare died Julian. Cervantes would have looked in vain for Shakespeare as he arrived before the pearly gates. If he had asked St. Peter, the records would show that Shakespeare was not expected to arrive for another 10 days. So I have a right to be suspicious of anniversaries, but not to this extent. BMJ bans anniversaries. We promise our readers no more boring anniversaries. That was the headline in the British Medical Journal website at the end of 1998. The editor, Richard Smith, went on, I have no idea what accent to use for the editor of the BMJ. Shall I use a Scottish one? It seems appropriate somehow. After an orgy of anniversaries in 1998, and with the prospect of the mother of all anniversaries causing civilization to grind to a halt in 2000, the BMJ is declaring 1999 an almost anniversary-free year. Because of popular demand, Christmas will be retained. Please do not contact us about the anniversary of your favourite institution, invention or person, and we won't call you. Warming to his theme and reflecting that the 1900s had been called the decade of the brain, Richard Smith also banned days, weeks, years and decades devoted to different diseases or age groups, commenting that they are a boring device invented by public relations companies to hijack public attention. I can well understand the editor's frustration. That year, his journal had acknowledged 50 years of the National Health Service, 150 years of the Public Health Act, 50 years since the first injection of cortisone, 175 years of the Lancet, and many, many more events. He had had enough. Anniversaries can silt up journals, he complained, as he considered the possibilities. We could celebrate the 5th, 10th, 15th, 20th, 25th, 50th, 75th, 100th, 150th, 175th, 200th, 250th, and 500th anniversaries, and so on forever, of the birth, death, and year of great achievement of every individual institution and journal, and of every government act, important medical development, and great paper, and so on ad infinitum. And by definition, this is cumulative. So if we don't give up marking anniversaries, we'll be overwhelmed. Already we dread the day when the BMJ will be filled with nothing but obituaries. But anniversaries might get there first. The consequence would be that the journal would be living permanently in the past. Our cry for 1999 is, let the news be new. As a consequence, the readership of the BMJ was not reminded that 1999 was the 40th anniversary of the contraceptive pill in Britain and the 50th anniversary of a very famous BMJ paper, I kid you not, on a study of circumcision called The Fate of the Foreskin. The editorial elicited 3 online responses. The first was rather clever. "In which case," said the writer, "you won't be interested to know that on June the 27th, 1999, Moorfields Eye Hospital will be celebrating 100 years at its current site in City Road in London." That was from the public relations officer at Moorfields Eye Hospital. Never one to miss an opportunity. The second response warmly congratulated the editor while inviting readers of BMJ to peer review the first ever conducted virtual medical examination of Santa Claus. One got the impression that the editor wasn't being taken entirely seriously, don't you think? And the third response, under the heading BMJ's Trojan Horse, made the germane observation: to ban all anniversaries in 1999 will have some unforeseen impact on the contents of the BMJ in the next millennium. I suggest to consider that in 2009 you will have to celebrate the 10th anniversary of this decision. Well, it is now 2009. And an opportune moment to reflect on the consequences. For the BMJ, it was a lull only. Almost 2 years to the day later, the journal was celebrating again, with an article on homemade ophthalmoscopes paying a 150th year tribute to Helmholtz. And the practice soon built up speed, so that by the anniversary of Smith's editorial, it was as if the ban had never happened. Roger Jones, the editor in 2007, began his editorial on the future of the medical profession with the words, "This year marks the 175th anniversary of the BMA. The 60th anniversary of the World Health Organization in 2008 was a honeypot for medical anniversarians, as was the 60th anniversary of the National Health Service. What does the future hold for the NHS at 60? Asked Rudolf Klein in another editorial. There is, I think, something impressive, magical almost, when an organization manages to celebrate a cluster of anniversaries at the same time. I am here to celebrate Cambridge University Press's 425th anniversary, as you know. Also, the 475th anniversary of the receiving of its Royal Charter, as you heard a few moments ago. Also, the 60th anniversary of the Press's New York office. Also, the 40th anniversary of the Press's Australia office. Also, the 20th anniversary of the Press's Brazil office. Also, the 250th anniversary of the birth of William Pitt the Younger, whose name is recalled in the Pitt Building. The 200th anniversary of the birth of Charles Darwin. The 150th anniversary of the publication of The Origin of the Species. Throw in the 800th anniversary of the university, and we are dealing with 9 related anniversaries in a single year. 9 in a single year? This cannot be coincidence. There has to be someone within the organization who has been planning these things. And moreover, throughout the centuries. Somewhere within the press, probably deep within the printing house, is a place known only to a select few, where a fraternity of editors meet who have the authority to decide CUP anniversaries. Knowledge that is passed on from generation to generation, a sort of publisher's Da Vinci Code. Thanks to my linguistic training, I can reveal here for the first time this evening that I have in fact cracked this code. The Da Vinci Code turns out to be more than just an analogy. The key is to use gematria, the system in which numerical values are assigned to letters of the alphabet. You know the system: A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3, and so on until you get to Z equaling 26. Identical values in words, or values separated by 100 in apparently unrelated names, are considered to be of the highest mystical significance. The total for Cambridge is 62. The total for Da Vinci is 62. The total for Stephen Bourne is 162. Add all the letter values up in the phrase Cambridge University Press and you get 303. Add all the letters up in the phrase Priory of Zion, whose role in the Da Vinci Code was critical, that's 179. Then add Da Vinci twice, 2 62s is 124, and you get 303. It is more than my life is worth to say more. I swear I saw an albino monk in the Edinburgh building. In the Edinburgh building this very afternoon. I'm sure I saw him. Oh. In all of this, the focus, as the word anniversary suggests, is on years. Anniversaries were called year days, Jahresdag, or mind days, Jahrmunddag in Old English. Days on which one is minded of a birth or death. The Latin word anniversarius, meaning returning yearly, is not recorded until 1230, when it's used first as an adjective, and not until 1552 as a noun, according to the dictionary that the other organization produces. It is an ecclesiastical term used with reference to saints' days. Later still, anniversary is the celebration that takes place on a particular day. The word was also used to refer to actual events or objects which identify an annual observance, such as a commemorative activity or a publication. Thomas Dekker in 1612 talked about chanting anthems, anniversaries, and dirges. Robert Southey in 1829 refers to a yearly published review as an anniversary, what today we'd call an annual, I suppose, as in Christmas annual. A rare use of a verb, to anniversary, has been noted in the 19th century. And the term I used a little while ago, anniversarian, is not yet recorded in the Oxford English Dictionary, though it has been used for some time, especially in American English, to refer to someone who celebrates an anniversary. In particular, anniversarians are orators or keynote speakers at annual celebratory gatherings, such as college, fraternity, sorority occasions. The term has retained its etymological emphasis on years, but the time reference of the event being celebrated often narrows. We remember years and dates, obviously, but also days with variable dates, like Martin Luther King Day, for instance. We remember months, Scout Anniversary Month, for instance. We remember weeks, NHS Anniversary Week. We remember hours, the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. We remember minutes, a memorial silence at 8:46 a.m. New York time on the 11th of September. We even remember seconds, as when 1999 became 2000. The term can also be broadened above a year, though this is less usual. You don't usually find people celebrating 2-year periods or 3-year periods, though you do get the occasional biennial and triennial. But decades are common enough. US naval aviation celebrated a diamond anniversary decade between 1981 and 1990. And we're in the second year of an anniversary decade right now, the Luther decade, remembering the period from September 1508, when Luther arrived in Wittenberg, to 1517, when he nailed his 95 Theses to the door of the church there. Most people see anniversaries as being of purely personal interest, hence the many gift ideas, such as the lists of materials which symbolize major wedding anniversaries or an anniversary edition of a newspaper on a birthday. Today, various technologies can help you remember that there is an anniversary. Last year saw the launch of the iDays for the iPhone and iPod Touch. The application keeps track of all the birthdays and anniversaries in a user's contact list, listing forthcoming events by age, name, or event type. You can press a Celebrate button for each contact, and that brings up a pop-up screen supporting email and gift links on Amazon. And if that isn't enough, there's a proposal now to develop a Remember ring. 24 hours before a special day begins, a hot spot on the ring's interior would begin to warm up to 120 degrees Fahrenheit for approximately 10 seconds. And in case that didn't do the trick, the ring would continue to warm up every hour, on the hour, all day long. Only the most pain-insensitive individual would forget their wedding anniversary under such circumstances, it seems to me. In the USA, a new trend was identified in 2008, the celebration vacation. American families are hitting the road to mark life's special occasions, said a report, and followed this up with the news that in 2009, Walt Disney Parks and Resorts were letting people in for free on their birthday. In the UK, rather more traditionally, there's an anniversaries office at Buckingham Palace, which arranges congratulatory messages from the monarch to mark 100th birthdays and 60th wedding anniversaries. Something that's happened since 1917. In fact, it's more than just 160. Cards are sent to those celebrating their 100th and 105th birthday, and every year thereafter. We should be so lucky. And to those celebrating their 60th, 65th and 70th wedding anniversaries, and every year thereafter. It's the Pensions Service that informs the Anniversaries Office of birthdays for recipients of UK state pensions. But data privacy factors mean that there's no automatic means of alerting the office for wedding anniversaries. If you want a card sent to someone, you have to make an application yourself, and well in advance. Different countries do different things. Britain perhaps has something to learn from Germany. Like Britain, the federal president congratulates people on reaching their centenary, their 105th, and all succeeding birthdays, and also couples on their 65th, 70th, and 75th wedding anniversaries. But he also accompanies the message with a small financial gift. Imagine the excitement. Moreover, at the president's request, the federal president may act as honorary godfather to a family's 7th or subsequent child, but only to one child in the family. Once accepted, the president issues the parents with a certificate and a gift, currently €500. According to the Bundespresident's website, federal presidents have become godfather to over 72,000 children in Germany since 1949. Mr. Brown, eat your heart out. Do you want Mr. Brown as your godfather? Sorry, that isn't in the script. That is not in the script. Sorry. Why do the Germans do this? The President's office explains. In becoming a child's godparent, the federal president is highlighting the state's special responsibility for the welfare of large families, as well as the importance of the family and children to the community as a whole. The intention is also to focus attention on the problems of large families, finding suitable accommodations, for instance, and encourage cities and local communities to offer help and support. Another purpose is to raise the social status of families with a large number of children. Clearly, the recognition of anniversaries is being motivated by other factors than the personal. And this can also be seen from the Octo website announcing the 800th anniversary of Cambridge University. It says, in marking the year, we aim to strike a balance between academic achievement and celebration, respect the past, celebrate the present, and leave a legacy for the future. We're keen to ensure that many of the ideas and plans for the 800th anniversary provide a springboard for the future, starting something fresh that will grow in years to come. That captures it well. The anniversary provides an opportunity for fresh thinking. It motivates people to reflect on how things have gone with respect to their topic of interest and where they want to go. And there is always somewhere else to go, for is there any subject in the world not worth revisiting? But any renewal of connection costs time, energy, and money. And there are hundreds of anniversaries competing for our attention at any one time. I can see why Richard Smith saw anniversaries as a boring device invented by public relations companies to hijack public attention. But hijacking public attention is precisely what anniversaries are all about. And when the domain being anniversaried is one which is close to your heart, the activity is by no means boring. The social role of anniversaries is well illustrated in South Africa by the decision of its government to mark major anniversaries in the history of the struggle towards democracy. On the 8th of March 2006, they launched the 50th anniversary of the Women's Anti-Pass March to the Union Buildings, a launch which coincided with International Women's Day. That year, a raft of anniversaries was commemorated, including the centenary of the Bambata Rebellion, the 30th anniversary of the Soweto uprisings, the 10th anniversary of the adoption of the Constitution, and the 50th anniversary of the treason trial. In a country deeply concerned to shape a new historical ethic, the focus on anniversaries is entirely understandable. As the American Spectator once put it, anniversary commemorations are a luxury, a way to add meaning and perspective to peaceful times. The economic role of anniversaries is well illustrated by the way charities operate. Anniversary celebrations can draw attention and dollars, reads a headline in the US Chronicle of Philanthropy. As an example, they report the decision of the Greater Pittsburgh Literacy Council to mark its 20th year of operations with a special dinner to start the charity's first capital campaign. They invited the African-American character actor, Danny Glover, to give a talk. The dinner raised $120,000, more than double the amount of past events. And the group eventually completed its $2.5 million campaign. People didn't realize we'd been around that long, said the group's executive director. Stressing the anniversary made them aware that this was an organization with a track record and it was not brand new. At a more commercial level, many companies recognize employee anniversaries as an important way of fostering commitment. In an article in the Silicon Valley Online Business Journal, Bob Nelson, author of 1001 Ways to Reward Employees, affirms, celebrating anniversaries is an important way to acknowledge a relationship between a company and an individual. Although such rewards recognize tenure rather than specific behavior or accomplishments, having loyal, committed employees is important to companies. How you recognize the loyalty, of course, varies greatly. The giving of clocks and watches is common, symbolizing the passing of time, or watches with a difference. At Wilson Learning Corporation, based near Minneapolis, each new employee, after passing a 3-month probationary period, is given, as a reminder always to have fun working for the company, a Mickey Mouse watch. On the 10th anniversary, the employee is given a gold Mickey Mouse watch. I have mentioned this story to several hard-nosed academics, and every time their face displays a look which I can only describe as supercilious envy. I can't see my VC doing that, said one rather sadly. That would be the day, wouldn't it? It's remarkable how many contexts attribute significance to anniversaries. And notwithstanding the public scorn, most people are realists. Economic commentator Samuel Britton observes, anniversaries of people's deaths or births are artificial affairs. There's no more reason to play the music of Mozart 250 years after he was born than there was after 249 years or will be after 251 years. But he nonetheless concludes, given the media fixation on such anniversaries, we might as well take advantage of them to call attention to ideas which may be otherwise overlooked. Are there memories left that are safe from the clutches of phony anniversaries? Guardian journalist W.J. Weatherby. And yet when we start to explore them, it is rare to find an anniversary that is truly phony. That is, of no value to anyone. Certainly there are anniversary sites which many people would find strange. One site I found, for example, asks for volunteers so that people who have had successful bariatric surgery, weight loss surgery, can receive a congratulatory message on the anniversary of their operation. Well done for losing weight a year ago. But the site is very popular and plainly performs a useful therapeutic function. Is it worth having a site which celebrates the 40th anniversary of Sesame Street and the arrival on our television screens of the first Muppets? I have yet to meet an academic who thinks that's a bad thing. Evidently, we have a fascination with anniversaries. It seems we cannot have enough of them. The frequency with which an On This Day column appears in newspapers or websites illustrates the perennial interest in the genre. Book collections of such dates appear, and have done for over a century, with such names as A Dictionary of Dates. W&R Chambers published their Book of Days in 2 volumes, over 1,600 pages in 1866. The book sold extremely well and went through several editions. Modern books sell similarly. There seems to be a universal curiosity to find out about the events that happened throughout history on a significant day, such as one's birthday. Some people set great store by them. All organizations do, otherwise we wouldn't be here today if it were otherwise. It's partly the pleasure of coincidence. Everyone is intrigued by coincidences, and especially by events which are time-related, such as when someone is born or dies on the same day, as in the supposed case of Shakespeare. For others, it's just an intriguing or jocular conversation point. People seem quite impressed by the fact that I share my birthday, the 6th of July, with rock and roll star Bill Haley. But it is a selective and fragile interest. I get a different reaction when it emerges I also share my day with George W. Bush. Whatever the reason, all 366 days of the conventional year are treated with considerable respect. 367 even, if you recall, February the 30th. An extra leap day added to Sweden's Julian calendar in 1712 to resolve dating discrepancies. Simon Denison, the editor of British Archaeology, wrote an opinion piece in 2001 which he called Moving Beyond the Anniversary Cult. He echoed the BMJ editor in his opening. A new year, a new set of anniversaries. That strange phenomenon so beloved of diary manufacturers, parade organizers, and history magazines. At this magazine, we try not to get too hot and bothered about anniversaries. This is partly because anniversaries seem a pretty lame excuse for a story as the most facile form of historical projection. But then he made an interesting observation to my mind. But the main reason is that anniversaries commemorate events. And as devotees of archaeology know well enough, events have only moderate importance in the overall scheme of understanding the past. Events can be illuminating, dramatic, and moving, and in rare instances can be genuinely world-changing, but their significance is often exaggerated. He went on to refer to the historian Fernand Braudel, who in The Mediterranean and the Mediterranean World in the age of Philip II likened events to the ripples on the surface of the sea. The important phenomena for understanding the past are the tides and undercurrents, he argued, the underlying states and long-term processes that shape the history of mankind. Such trends, for example, the development of rapid transport, the global impact of consumer electronics, defy adversarial thinking. In Denison's view, these long-term trends have been neglected in education by comparison with the focus on momentous events and their anniversaries. And in our personal lives too, he argues, it's essential to achieve a balance between processes and events. Birth, marriage, and other major events are important, but the long-term effects of upbringing and experience are more so. Denison challenges us to think of the things that are important to us now. A love of films, a love of music, a love of the theatre, religious beliefs, an enthusiasm for conservation, a delight in cooking, whatever it might be, and find an anniversarial starting point for them. There are some who will be able to cite a Damascene moment, but they are very rare. For most of us, anniversaries are a distraction from what really makes us human. And yet without them, something is lacking. Anniversaries focus the mind. They're a distraction, yes, but a necessary one. I cannot do without them, personally. And I therefore happily bathe in the myriad anniversaries that surround my subject, linguistics, this year. If your interest is in the language of literature, for example, you can attend innumerable events surrounding the 400th anniversary of the publication of Shakespeare's sonnets, the 250th anniversary of the birth of Robert Burns, the 300th anniversary of the birth of Dr. Johnson, the 225th anniversary of his death. In 2009, also, linguistic folklorists can meditate on the significance of the fact that while stationer Thomas Thorpe was publishing the first edition of Shakespeare's sonnets, folklorist Thomas Ravenscroft had a book published containing the first reference to 3 blind mice. Linguists with sociological or cultural interests can take heart from the fact that 2009 is the 30th anniversary of the Plain English campaign, when founder Chrissy Marr publicly shredded hundreds of official documents in Parliament Square, London. It's also the 425th anniversary of Sir Walter Raleigh's expedition to Roanoke Island in Old Virginia, now North Carolina, where he hoped to establish an English colony. His first expedition failed, as did others, but the one in 1606 succeeded. Within weeks, the sailors were writing letters home in which there were such Americanisms as moccasin, wigwam, and skunk. A new dialect of English was being born. Linguists with technological interests can reflect on the fact that this year is the 40th anniversary of ARPANET, the US Department of Defense project for research into networking, which became the basis of the Internet. It's also the 30th anniversary of the first commercial cell phone system operated by NTT in Tokyo. A remarkable array of new genres of language has developed as a consequence of these technologies, such as email, chatroom dialogue, instant messaging, blogging, text messaging, and, of course, tweeting. Some of you may be tweeting right now. Blogging has an anniversary this year. It went public with the launch of Blogger.com in 1999. Happy birthday, dear bloggers, you've rewritten the rules, was the headline in The Observer by John Norton. And 1999, of course, was the year when we first heard of Google. Anniversaries make us reflect. Being asked to give this lecture in 2009 makes me think back on my own working relationship with the press. As Andy mentioned a little while ago, it is indeed 40 years since I was first published by the press, with 2 books coming out in 1969, both published by the Syndics in Euston Road, London. 20 years later, and we were putting the first edition of the Cambridge Encyclopedia to bed, this time in Annandale Street, Edinburgh. An unusual address to be associated with the press, indeed, but a consequence of a short-lived but exciting joint venture project between the press and W&R Chambers, in which the Edinburgh firm took responsibility for the book's production. 5 years later, the first edition appeared of the Cambridge Encyclopedia of the English Language, or CEEL, as it's known in-house, in the now familiar setting of Shaftesbury Road. That seems to have put me in a unique position as far as the press is concerned, for in Michael Black's history, I am mentioned not once, but twice. The Cambridge Encyclopedia on one page, and CEEL actually has its own picture on another. Truly an honour, for the only other authored works, if you exclude the Bible, pictured in those pages are those by Isaac Newton, Lord Acton, and Charles Darwin. Some people have suggested that there is a third reference to me hidden on page 61. If you look carefully at the picture of the press's former New York office, you will see that the name above the door is the Crystal Building. I have never actually been officially informed of this accolade, so I must reluctantly conclude that the name has some other interpretation. 1989, not a good year to be trying to stabilize the world within the pages of an encyclopedia. I've told this story before, but anniversaries are all about retelling old stories, so why not today when we're in a remembering frame of mind? Imagine a first edition of an encyclopedia going to press in a year when the whole world was being turned upside down. An encyclopedia editor is always to some degree predicting the future, placing a bet on stability, that situations will not change. Sometimes the editor will win. For example, the date of a death, generally speaking, though you remember old style, new style, is an agreed point. But sometimes the editor will lose because he or she will be overtaken by events. There's perhaps nothing surprising in this, as it is the motive for all updated reprints and new editions, but it's present in a more dramatic form in encyclopedia editing. T.S. Eliot's Prufrock measured out his life in coffee spoons. Encyclopedia editors measure out their lives in newspaper obituaries and the regular current affairs reports in Keysing's Contemporary Archives. While in theory, updating is a continuum, in practice, it's an infinite series of deadlines imposed by the exigencies of the publishing schedule. A decision has to be made concerning the timing of an updated reprint or a new edition. Once that decision is made, a well-oiled machine takes over. Time has to be booked at the printer, paper has to be ordered, marketing plans have to be arranged, space in bookshops has to be planned. The editorial deadline, the date by which final copy has to be submitted to the publisher, is one about which there is very little flexibility. Nothing short of an event of worldwide significance will alter it. But one thing is certain. A month, or a week, or a few days before that deadline, that world-shattering event will take place. Thus, my deadline for the first edition of the Cambridge Encyclopedia was the 15th of November, 1989. On the 9th of November, the East Germans opened the Berlin Wall. The next day, Todor Zhivkov of Bulgaria is deposed. We put the deadline back 2 weeks to see what happens. A fortnight later, the Communist Party leadership resigns in Czechoslovakia. We put the deadline back another fortnight and rewrite our entries. A year later, we're in an identical position as the deadline for the first updated reprint is agreed, the end of October 1990. On the 3rd of October, the two Germanys unite. 700 consequential changes now have to be made, as all contemporary references to East and West Germany must go. It cannot be done automatically, as historical references to East and West Germany have to stay. Has to be done manually, one reference at a time. The deadline is put back to the end of November. Surely nothing else will happen. On the 28th of November, Mrs. Thatcher resigns. I took that very personally. All the entries on Major, Howe, Hurd, Heseltine, Baker and all the others have to be altered. We meet the deadline, but only just. A year later, and we're in an identical position as we prepare for the second updated reprint, and a deadline is fixed for the end of October 1991. On the 19th of August, there is a coup in the Soviet Union. I prepare for the worst. Editorially speaking. A few days later, the status quo is restored. I breathe a sigh of editorial relief. But my sigh is premature. In October, the KGB is abolished. Something is definitely up. We postpone to the end of November. On the 4th of November, almost all Soviet Union ministries are abolished. The Soviet Union is fragmenting. I see over 1,000 references to the USSR falling about me like autumn leaves. For a brief moment, there's editorial optimism. On the 14th of November, agreement is announced that the USSR is going to be replaced by a union of sovereign states. Editorially, a superb decision, as USSR to USS means a change of only one letter. But a week is a long time in encyclopedia editing. On the 25th of November, 7 republics refuse to initial the treaty. We postpone the deadline until the end of December. Perhaps USSR will stay. Will there be a change of name? I try to find out. I telephone the Soviet embassy in London what they intend to call the USSR, both in English and in Russian. I am asked if I want a visa. I repeat the question. I'm told that it is the Western press which has published the new name, USS, not the Soviets, and that I should phone the Novesti press agency. Novesti doesn't know what the name is either, but opine that if we must go into print, perhaps ex-USSR will do. The Novesti spokesman cannot help with the Russian spelling, as he doesn't speak Russian. And in any case, the agency is closing at the end of the month. He gives me the number of the Society for Cultural Relations with the USSR. They are not answering the phone. I phone the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. They'll know what's going on. They advise me to continue with USSR until the end of the year. There will definitely be no change of name before Christmas. A week later, the Commonwealth of Independent States is proposed. And on the 20th December, Soviet embassies all over the world are told to strike the name Soviet Union from their records. So much for FCO intelligence. My deadline is the 1st of January. It cannot be held up any further. I have a busy Christmas eliminating 1,000 references to the USSR. But what do I do about the CIS? Dare I write an entry informing the readership of the reprinted Cambridge Encyclopedia in July 1992 that there exists an organization called the Commonwealth of Independent States? It's only a proposal. It might get thrown out, as USS did. Dare I write an entry under letter C before it happens? I dare. In such a manner do encyclopedia editors impose structure on the world. As we all know, the CIS did come into being. I was not embarrassed when the reprinted edition eventually appeared. But conspiracy theorists might view the CIS story differently. You'll remember that there were spies here in Cambridge. The Cambridge Four were Kim Philby, Donald Maclean, Guy Burgess, and Anthony Blunt. Some people think there was a Cambridge Five, or even more, but nobody, as far as I know, has ever suggested that there was a plant at Cambridge University Press. There must have been. How can the facts be explained? My theory is this. The Russians are in a turmoil after the events of November 1991. They do not know what to call the new country. The new name, CIS, has been proposed, but not everyone likes it. Then in January, there's a call from their mole at the press. I have seen the proofs of the next edition of the Cambridge Encyclopedia, he says, and they contain an entry on the Commonwealth of Independent States. He goes on. They would not have put this in if they did not know something that we do not know. The Russians see the wisdom of this remark and immediately authorize the formal use of the designation. Nobody ever discovered the CUP plant, nor has anyone found the message which would provide the evidence supporting this account. But it will be found one day. And in the meantime, I humbly accept the view of those who say that I am personally responsible for the final dissolution of the Soviet Union. Every time I think of those unbelievably hectic editorial years, I feel tired. I think this is what clinical psychologists and psychotherapists call an anniversary reaction, in which unresolved grief after a traumatic event manifests itself on the anniversary of that event. But it has not put me off celebrating anniversaries, nor, I am glad to say, has it put the press off either. For these celebrations put us rightly in mind of the remarkable achievements of an organisation which has for so long refreshed so many of the parts that other publishers have been unable to reach. It's difficult to know to whom to give the last word on anniversaries. Perhaps it should be Longfellow, who reflected in his poem Holidays, "The holiest of all holidays are those kept by ourselves in silence and apart, the secret anniversaries of the heart." Perhaps it should be George Bernard Shaw to get the last word on anniversaries. In a review of As You Like It in the Saturday Review of the 2nd of May 1896, he commented, "Annual celebrations are all very well in theory, but they're too much of a good thing. I've long ceased to celebrate my own birthday, and I don't see why I should celebrate Shakespeare's. But my vote for the last word on anniversaries is Liverpool football manager Bill Shankly. The one you may recall who denied that football was a matter of life and death. It's much more important than that. Here's someone who gave anniversaries both respect and disrespect at the same time. And I can't think of a better way of summarizing the ambivalence I've encountered towards the notion of anniversaries. He said, "Of course I didn't take my wife to see Rochdale as an anniversary present. It was her birthday. Would I have got married during the football season? And anyway, it wasn't Rochdale. It was Rochdale Reserves." Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.